Welcome everyone to another edition of Play It Through, and on this edition it's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, brought to us by Konami. This is based on the TMNT arcade game from 1989. The reason why it has the number 2 on it is to distinguish it from the original NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which came out a year prior, but was vastly different from this game. This series would continue with TMNT 3, The Manhattan Project, and TMNT 4, Turtles in Time, which was also based off an arcade game. However, Manhattan Project was an original game just for the NES. As we begin the game, you can select which of the turtles you want to play as. You can play the game 1 or 2 player. Raphael is my personal favorite Ninja Turtle, so that's who I'm going to be playing as throughout the course of the game, and there really isn't a ton of difference with the Turtles this time around as compared to the original NES Turtles game, where it did make a lot of difference due to their weaponry. The game is very much a beat-em-up style, taking on wave after wave of enemies, mostly the different types of foot soldiers throughout the course of the game, and dealing with bosses at the end of levels. For the most part, it's a relatively faithful port from the arcade game. There's in fact new additions to the NES version that weren't there, like new levels, additions to the levels, and thus also new boss battles for you to deal with, and a few other bosses being changed up. Level number 1 here, inside of the burning apartment building, I always thought it was kind of a cool effect of the fire in all of the doorways, as well as just the fire raging at all times at the bottom. Thankfully, you're not able to get hurt by that there. And you're dealing with, of course, lots of foot soldiers, mostly the original purple kind, though new ones are introduced slowly throughout the level, as well as, of course, throughout the entire game. Unlike the arcade version, though, that could have multiple types on screen at once, the NES version was limited to only having one type of the foot soldier on screen at a time, so if you're fighting purple guys, you're only going to be fighting them. Fighting blue guys, you're only going to be fighting the blue ones. Being an early beat-em-up game, it's a pretty simple combat system. You have your jump, your attack, you're able to do a jump kind of kick attack, as well as if you press jump and then attack just slightly after jumping, you're able to do that kind of jumping sweep move I'm able to do with both of my sides. This is your special move. It doesn't hurt you at all, it does double the damage of a normal attack, and thus is extremely useful for wiping out the enemies. It takes a little bit to get used to the timing of pressing the jump right before that attack, but once you get the timing down, it becomes second nature, and you'll find yourself easily being able to do it throughout the entire length of the game. Mastering this will greatly help you out, dealing with not only the normal enemies, but also every time you're able to hit one of those against a boss, you're doing double damage to the bosses. The bosses, for the most part, are pretty challenging since they're able to hit you quite easily, and dealing damage to them isn't always the easiest. A lot of times my goal in boss fights is to try to get them in a loop. It's hard to do unless you perfectly time your attacks, and it's not just mashing the attacks, it really is a lot of just this exact timing that you need to get a nice pattern going. Rocksteady is the easiest to do this with. As you can see, I'm able to kind of get him to the side right there, and then get into a nice timed set of those special attacks. If you do it right, you can kind of get him pinned. Doing this just right will negate some of his attacks, as well as the same thing will happen to a lot of the bosses throughout. I am far from an expert at this, and after trying for years to kind of master it, I'm still not that great, but at least able to tangle with the enemies and bosses a lot easier than I was when I was a kid. Level number 2 has us going to the streets here. You have Shredder taunting us from the TV in the window. You're able to interact with a few of the objects throughout the level and send them out at people. You'll also have the foot soldiers popping out of the sewers, and then you can throw the manhole cover back at them by attacking it, knocking them out and dealing damage. One of the other differences with the arcade version and this version was the sponsorship from Pizza Hut. There are several Pizza Hut icons, logos throughout the course of the game, and in the actual instruction manual you got a coupon that has long since expired, but you got a free personal pan pizza when you used it. This part of the level I always thought was cool. You have the different levels that you're able to climb on. You can jump up to the top one. You also have this girl on the skateboard. She's clearly a civilian, not an enemy by any means, but when you attack her, she ducks, you don't hurt her, but it actually does give you a point. So if you're working on trying to get your points up to potentially get extra lives, attacking her will actually reward you. So being a nuisance is actually a good thing, at least a little bit here in TMNT 2, the arcade game. Another interesting note is in the arcade game you can both do levels that scroll up and ones that scroll down. However, in the NES version you only have the moments where you're scrolling the screen downwards. Once you get down here, be careful of the two signs. They will fall from the wall, dropping Pizza Hut advertisements all over the streets. You're also dealing with the yellow Foot Clan guys that can throw boomerangs out at you. After dealing with that group of foot soldiers there, we're moving to the end of the level here with some junked cars, as well as another manhole cover that will be thrown your way, courtesy of that foot soldier. Deal with all the rest of the enemies here, and then we have our next boss encounter against Bebop. Now, Bebop is a very similar boss encounter to Rocksteady. Bebop's gun can only fire straight, though, so you can do jumping attacks very efficiently to him. However, he attacks faster, so I'm not able to usually do my kind of jumping spam attack as easily to him as I was to Rocksteady. One strategy I've learned that works on most bosses in the game is when you're walking down on the screen and attacking slowly. So do an attack and hit him, then walk one small step down and then do it again. You usually get out of the range of the immediate attack of the boss and are able to land another attack solidly before he's able to attack. Also, keeping your distance a bit helps you a lot as far as sometimes being able to just edge out of an attack window and being able to just dodge attacks. At the end of the boss fight, I do jump down the manhole, which is funny because when you jump down there, you're damaged, you get a little cute saying and all and pop back out, but you actually do have to jump down there in order to go to the next level. The sewer is usually regarded as one of the worst levels in games, no matter what game it is, and this one's not terrible, but still not one of the more memorable stages by any means. You have two parts of the stage that you can see separated. You have the dry part, and then the water part below. You go a lot slower in the water, a lot harder to deal with enemies, especially things like the Mousers that pop out of the wall here. So to deal with them, we're going to stay on dry land, do the special attack to the Mousers popping out of the hole here in the wall. You want to make sure that you're doing the special attack, though, because one hit is not enough damage to defeat them. For some reason, also, in the water, missiles will fly at you constantly. I don't know if this is also to deter you from going in there, but since it's easier on dry land anyway, it's just more reason to stay out of the water. The sledgehammer foot soldiers and any of the foot soldiers you're dealing with melee weapons at hand can be a bit annoying. You want to make sure that you try to keep your distance a bit, attacking as they kind of are a bit farther than maybe necessarily you would think. But because you're attacking them from a bit farther away, that prevents them if they're doing a quick running jump attack, or if they're trying to swing their own weapon a lot of times, your attack will end up landing a little bit before theirs and end up defeating them. Be careful throughout the level. There's a couple of these crashing gates that you'll have to deal with, pushing you usually either into the water or you can quickly try to go underneath of them. But since you walk relatively slow on foot, I usually just try to go in the water real quick and then get back onto land safely. After dealing with another Mauser hole here, we're pretty good at dealing with these guys by the end of the level, which is very good, considering we'll have to deal with them in the boss encounter. After this set of blue enemies, these are the last guys before the boss encounter against Dr. Baxter Stockman. Now, the only thing that Baxter Stockman does during this fight is fly around and drop Mausers. If you're right close to him when you're doing the jumping attack, you'll do a lot of damage and usually defeat the Mausers anyway. If you're playing two-player mode, just have one person take out the Mausers and the other person deal with him, and this boss is a cinch. Even with one player, this is the easiest fight in the entire game, so enjoy it for what it is. After he's defeated, we're moving on to the next scene in a snow-filled level. The next level is a snow-filled Central Park in New York City. You can see the city in the background there. Cool level here, as well as it's an original stage to this version of the game, and that also includes the boss encounter at the end of the level. We start off by getting chased by falling ice before having to deal with foot soldiers. There's of course a few ice and snow-themed enemies and perils throughout this level, including giant snow-removing bulldozer type things that you have to jump out of the way of or get above on the screen to avoid. There's some Pizza Hut advertisements, and then we're introduced to another new enemy type. These are little robots and disguised as snowmen. They're actually one of the cooler enemies, in my opinion, in the game. They do take several hits to defeat. You'll have to use 3 of the special moves, or I think 5 regular hits is enough to defeat them. When they're in their kind of non-snowman phase, they jump a little bit more, they have more speed and such, as well as they also will fire missiles out at you the whole time, so be careful of those. Also in this level are snowball throwing foot soldiers that go along with the themed level. So as you can see, even though they introduced a new level into this compared to the arcade game, they did a lot with it, at least as far as the theme was concerned. Be careful of the snow-covered pits throughout this section of the level as well. Like the manholes in level 2, you fall down them, you will end up losing a little bit of health before popping back out. Watch out for another one of the giant vehicles during this segment before eventually being able to scroll the screen a bit more for more snowball throwing foot soldiers. After dealing with more of those snowball foot soldiers, we see another Pizza Hut sign, and that signals a bunch more of those snowball robot guys to end up attacking us from the left side. We're going to use our special move to try to take them out. If they end up jumping up in the air, doing a jumping kick towards them ends up reaching such a distance that it's a very effective way for also dealing with these guys. Right after that, you're going to have a gauntlet of more of those ice blocks falling from the sky. During the open areas, if you're at the very top of the screen, I find that very safe. Usually nothing will hit you if you're at the very top. During this segment with the hedges, though, and the fence, you're not able to get to the very top of the screen, so I usually kind of do like that W wave pattern there in order to try to get around. After that, you have a couple more foot soldiers before you battle Tora. Tora is a really cool looking boss, and is exclusive to the NES version of the game. What ends up being helpful during this fight is he's slow. This will allow you, if you're able to get that timing down with your attack, to sometimes hit 2 or 3 of your attacks in a row before one of his fists get through. Now, when he does end up lowering your health, or you're trying to save as much of your lives as possible, you can start avoiding him, doing one of the moves or a jumping kick, and then quickly getting away from him. Because of his slow punch that he does with that lunge punch, and it being so slow, you can jump away from it and then come back in to deliver a hit a second later. Overall, while Tora has a decent amount of health, the most that we've dealt with so far, he ends up being an easier fight than some of the others because of his speed. Next up, we're in a level again from the actual arcade game. This time it's kind of a parking lot situation. Some of the cars will come towards us, but there's only a couple of those. As well as you have the big container truck things that will end up popping open and end up having foot soldiers come out of those as well. Throughout the game, there's a couple explosive barrels. If you're able to deliver damage to them, it'll start to smoke and then a second later explode. This will, of course, destroy any enemies nearby, and it's a little efficient for destroying them, but a lot of times it's hard to get the enemies to stay long enough and near it enough that it'll actually hurt them when that thing blows up. At this point, we've kind of seen all the styles of foot soldiers. There's some variants and the types, but you'll have like the melee guy, a regular straight attacking with the fist, and then you have the guys that throw projectiles out, including these blue guys here that can reach you from a decent amount across the screen. So be careful, as long as you're like not on the same plane as them, usually it's pretty easy to dodge their attack. Usually a jump kick to them if they're far away is a nice way to do that. While the arcade version of this game did get a kind of re-release years later with the Xbox Live version that unfortunately no longer can be purchased, the NES version didn't get any kind of re-release, even on the Wii Virtual Console, even though it was scheduled to see a release. Probably more licensing, maybe the Pizza Hut logos or something else caused the game not to end up getting that re-release on Wii Virtual Console. These foot soldiers can be a bit annoying because they not only have the melee swipe, but they also have that projectile that they're able to fire out, making them a bit more versatile than some of the other foot soldiers we're dealing with. Like I mentioned, there were a few changes, like some of the bosses and levels being extended. Another difference is in this stage. At the end of this level, you actually would go on to face Bebop and Rocksteady together, but instead we get to fight the fly form of Baxter Stockman, who we dealt with in the sewer just a few levels ago. Be careful of any of the vans during the later part of the stage. There's this really cool part right here where you're able to kind of get them all to jump towards that explosive barrel to blow them all up at once. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to hit all three of the foot soldiers right after they get out of the van, but usually a couple of special moves and I'm able to take them down. When you see the yellow kind of like elevator in the back, you know we're getting to the end of the stage and it's time to battle the boss. There is health in the upper right corner, you can grab that, and I recommend getting just to the edge, right under the Pizza Hut sign, and you do your special attack just as Baxter Stockman is going upwards. If you time it right, you'll get him before he gets all the way to the top of the screen. Then, if you keep doing the special move and timing it correctly, you can just keep hitting him over and over and over again, and he's never able to do any damage to you. It will for sure take a little bit of practice to get used to that, but once you have that timing down, this makes it one of the easiest bosses in the game. After the cutscene with the turtle van and April O'Neil thanking the turtle that saved her, we move on to the next level here on the highway itself. This is a big open area, giving the guys that throw out projectiles a bit more room to move around and get shots in on you. You also have these spear guys that can throw their spear as well as they can jab you a little bit, so try to be careful of their range. You will also have to deal with vehicles on the bridge itself. A little ways in, you'll have this open convertible come flying down the street, so be careful of that, followed by more of the sledgehammer foot soldiers that we saw earlier on in previous levels. After dealing with the sledgehammer enemies, you'll have a group of roadkill Rodneys to deal with. I usually wait on the right side for them to circle around and be able to take them out. Always be careful of the purple foot soldiers. From this point on in the game, you have the ones that throw the dynamite. A bit more annoying than just the regular ones, the ones with spears, since that explosion can get quite annoying. Thankfully, though, you can do that special attack and be able to kind of dodge those dynamite, as well as pretty much most of the attacks in the game. The special attack will be able to kind of negate the damage you would take. Here we have another one of those cars driving by. If you're actually at the very bottom of the screen, there's no way for the car to hit you as well, so not just the top of the screen or jumping over it is safe. You can actually just hang out the bottom as well. Then right after that you have these foot soldiers that not have dynamite, no, they have giant missiles that they're carrying. I don't know how far they had to carry these things, but they're carrying them and they just throw them right at you, usually missing. Or if you attack them, they will drop them, in which case they can hurt you if you're just doing a ground attack, so keep that in mind as well. Either do the special attack, or make sure that they throw it away from you. We're almost to the end of this level. There's actually no boss at the end of this stage. Which of the Ninja Turtles is your favorite to play as in this game, or really any of the game? Which one is your favorite? Do you play as a different turtle, or change it up? Do you have a secondary one that you would pick because your friends would end up picking the one you like, so you're like, oh, can't be the one I really want to be, so I'll be this turtle instead. For me, it was always Raphael or Donatello, and I think that was really because the NES game Donatello was so useful when I was a kid. Like, I just loved him from that, even though on the cartoon and the movies and everything, I was always pro Raphael. But because Donatello was so good in that first game, that kind of stigma of him having the best weapon, the longest reach with the bow, was something that I always stuck with. So no matter what game I played with my friends for years later, I would always end up picking Donatello just because of the bow and the longest reach. The next level has us on a hoverboard, dealing with all kinds of foot soldiers on other vehicles, as well as flying overhead, trying to drop down tons of bombs on us. These flying helicopter enemies are pretty annoying. They have the gun attack as well as dropping missiles down directly on you, and they have a lot of health, so it takes a pretty good amount of hits to deal with them. Then we're dealing with the regular foot soldiers on hoverboards as well. Kind of fun, these TMNT games with hoverboard segments. We have this one. We see the surfing segment in Manhattan Project. You have Neon Knight Riders in Turtles in Time. And all are pretty fun and memorable. I love Neon Knight Riders. Love the music and that level overall. Here we have to deal with another one of those helicopter enemies. Doing the dive kicks is pretty effective because you're able to hit him, stop him from getting those shots off, because it'll just break his chain of fire, as well as you'll be able to get through them with the kick, dodging the fire he's doing directly on the ground. Once he's defeated though, that's actually the end of the level. You get a cutscene and then move on to the next stage. After the turtle van has crashed, Splinter is stolen or kidnapped by a bunch of Mousers. You're now setting off to, of course, save Splinter. Right at the beginning of the level, you have a Mouser hole open up in the top of the section, dealing with a bunch of Mousers, just like we did in the sewer level earlier on. This level features one of the hardest bosses in the game. It's a big jump up because you haven't had a boss for a couple of levels, and the previous boss, Baxter Stockman, even without using that kind of exploit to get him to stay in one spot, he's still not the most difficult of bosses. The boss at the end of here, as well as throughout the rest of the game though, that's where the difficulty really revs up in the boss department. During this segment here, you can stay safe by just going to the top portion, or you can jump in between all of the beams. You'll probably have to at least drop down between the lasers in order to deal with the foot soldier enemies, as they tend to stay spawned on that part of the screen. After dealing with all those foot soldiers in that laser field, you have a new enemy that ends up dropping in. You have these robots that you'll have to deal with. Thankfully though, if you do the special move right in front of them, that will defeat them instantly. Or a couple of other quick attacks, making them a bit easier since they drop in slowly, as you can see, giving you at least a little bit of time to get close to them and deliver an attack before they're really able to get moving and do anything to you. Right after that, you have another explosive barrel at the top of the screen with a foot soldier flying through the window. After dealing with another broken window and more foot soldiers, we don't make it to a boss, though it seems like it would be. We basically have another one of those drills like we saw earlier in the game pop out of the ground, but instead we have a new enemy type to deal with. These flying nuisance enemies will pop out and fly around, and they're a pretty big pain in the butt, but thankfully we can kind of stand right around here, right next to them, and do that special attack, and if you do it right, you can hit all of them right away. It does take 2 of them or 3 hits, I think, in order to defeat them normally. Right after the first wave, you'll have another wave immediately after. Jumping attacks are also very efficient during that encounter as well, since a lot of their attacks, the lasers, are firing straight downwards, and you'll be able to dodge most of them while in the air. Here we have another song and dance with foot soldiers and an explosive barrel in the background. This is now the third time we've pretty much done the same exact thing in this level. We then have the Pizza Hut logo on the wall in the back, followed by 2 laser turrets. These guys are annoying, so I recommend taking them both out just to stop the noise, or you can just take out the one on the right since that one is more problematic. You can get health right away at the beginning of the fight against General Trag, or save it till a little bit later on. I grabbed it, so I'm kind of stuck with it now. The best strategy for Trag is doing the special attack as much as possible, and like I said before, going down slightly on the screen a lot of times will allow you to kind of hit him and be able to get away from some of his attacks. This is a difficult fight. He doesn't give you really much time at all to get away from his kind of swiping with the gun, but thankfully that gun attack doesn't do a ton of damage, so this will allow you to be able to deal a good amount of damage to him before he ends up wiping out your whole health bar. Once you start to get low, or if you try to save as much health as possible, jump attacks can be somewhat efficient, though the farther you're away from him, the more likely he is to use that flamethrower attack. Small steps up and down though, and using the special attack as much as possible, General Trag is defeated, and we're moving on to the next stage. The next level of the game is another new level just for the NES version, the 13th Floors, Japanese-themed stage with a bunch of new enemy types that we have to deal with throughout. The enemy types, including the Barbarian, Scorpion, and Tiger, are some of the toughest the game offers. These guys, the Barbarians, start off really slow, but they can jump around if you let them, so it's best to get in close, deliver 2 of their special attacks, if possible, or if you knock them far enough away and they jump in the air, doing a counter jump kick attack of your own is a good way to knock them back down to the ground and get you close enough where you can deliver the final hit if needed. Those guys, though, are the easiest of the new enemies as far as this level is concerned. Thankfully, there are periods of time where we just get to fight lowly foot soldiers again, so at least the game gives you a tiny bit of a break. But this is more of a marathon level for sure. Just the amount of intense enemies that you're dealing with is quite a pain. Be careful a little bit ways in, as you will have the floor open up as a foot soldier pops out. Just like manholes that we've fallen through before, you can fall through these ones and end up taking damage, so be careful of them. Right after this marker in the background, 3 more of the foot soldiers will pop out of the ground, so be careful not to quickly turn around and fall into one of those pits that they create. You're then bombarded with a bunch more foot soldiers, though thankfully they're pretty easy to deal with. The next couple of waves of foot soldiers are just your typical purple guys. There's nothing special to them, but thankfully they're easier than some of the other stuff we have coming ahead, like these bamboo spikes that pop out of the ground. Jumping, I find, or going to the top of the screen and jumping, seems to be pretty effective for avoiding them. And then we have to deal with the tiger enemies. Our goal is to knock them over to one side so we can really kind of level them with attacks. Using the special attack can be very useful, but sometimes they'll be able to land and get an attack off of their own. After the one tiger, we then have another tiger right afterwards, and we're going to do kind of the same thing, trying to keep it to one side and being able to hit it with a few of their special attacks. If it gets away from you, though, by using one of the attacks of its own, one thing that's cool is if you use the special attack while it's running through you, you can sometimes just barely tag it and be able to do damage to it still. After the tiger enemies, we then get followed up by another tough enemy, the scorpions. 2 of them come immediately at you. They have a decent amount of health, though spamming a special attack against them on a wall is an effective way to deal with all of them. If they get away and kind of break apart from one another, they can spam their attacks and easily drain a lot of your health, so be very careful of the scorpions. And then they're followed up right afterwards by more of the barbarians we saw earlier on in the stage. Once again, trying to keep them to one side, or doing the jump attacks when they jump towards you is a good way to keep them to that one side and grounded. As we're getting closer to the end of the level, thankfully the last bit here is pretty easy. We don't have any of the special enemy types from here on out. We just have normal foot soldier guys to deal with. You have some of them that come from hidden walls and some other cool effects here, but still, thankfully just normal foot soldiers. Be careful here in grabbing the pizza. You want to grab that when you're low on health because that's the only pizza you're going to get in the whole level. And we have the boss fight right after this last group of foot soldiers. And the Shogun boss is really tough. Just like with General Trag, this is going to be a challenging fight. The good thing is, though, I find that jump kicks on Shogun work better than it did on General Trag as far as being able to get in and quickly attack him. I'm going to start off by spamming the special attack as much as possible to drain at least a little bit of his health. If you do it quickly enough, you can keep his head on the whole battle. If that happens, you're in luck. The fight is a lot easier. Unfortunately, I run out of luck and the head comes off right away, making this fight a lot harder than I want it to be. However, once he's kind of down a little bit on the health and he's just kind of going back and forth, as you can see, if you time it just right, you can jump kick, attack him, and jump away before the swipe of his big blade. It's not something you can do on every boss because of how quick a lot of them attack, but thankfully that Shogun blade is a bit slower and allows us to dodge out and defeat him. Once he's defeated, we drop through the ground here, and now we're all of a sudden at the Technodrome. You actually would go right from that other level, the one with General Trag, to the Technodrome if you were playing the arcade version of the game. That 13th floor level, cool addition, but kind of odd overall as far as just the general flow of everything. But here it is, the final level of the game, and boy, what a final level it is. Not only do you have the Technodrome and tons of different types of enemies that we've been dealing with throughout the entire game. You have giant laser turrets, lasers shooting the entire length of the floor, and not one, not two, but 3 boss encounters before we finally get to beat the game. In the background, you will have sometimes that open up with these panels and a few foot soldiers popping out. One of the other annoying enemies throughout this final level is these machines that shoot out ice that will freeze you in place. Recommend kind of jumping through them or getting away from them. They pop out wherever you're standing, so wherever you end up landing from your jumps, they're going to end up popping up to attack you. This way, though, if you keep jumping, they'll never be able to really land an attack on you. And while we'll have plenty of the foot soldiers and other robotic enemies, we don't get to see any more of the barbarians, scorpions, tigers, or even any of the enemies from the snow level that were introduced in this stage. While it was awesome to see the new enemies and stages in the NES version, it would have been cool also to see them implemented in levels that they wouldn't have been in the arcade version. Basically, they kind of stuck to the formula as far as the arcade stages, but went kind of crazy with the extra stages, which was cool, but it ends up kind of making those stages really feel that much different from the original arcade games. It's one of those like nitpicking armchair developer things you think of as I've been playing the game over and over again in preparation for the video. It doesn't take anything away from the game, still love it, just one of those things I've been thinking about. With the gauntlet of wave after wave of foot soldier enemies, thankfully the kind of way they rush in, you can get a special attack on one and then quickly get to the spot of the next one and hit him before he's able to really kind of get on screen or get an attack pattern of his own going. They really test you at this spot. There's a laser going on in the background as well as a ton of the katana wielding foot soldiers. Right after this, we'll have another gauntlet of those ice spewing machines before we make it to an elevator segment. Once you make it to this elevator segment here, you don't have to deal with any enemies, but you do have to deal with the giant rolling cannonballs coming down. They kind of work their way from top to bottom, and then from bottom back up to the top. You just really don't even have to move much. If you just stand kind of still and just jump, you'll be able to avoid them. Then, getting off of the elevator here, we can grab health. If you're low on health, or deal with these couple of enemies here before grabbing it. Make sure, though, you do get it before going completely off screen and then passing it by. After dealing with those red gun guys, we have a group of the roadkill Rodneys making an appearance at the level. They will circle to the left and of course come back around, or you can chase them down on the left side when they kind of get to that first spot. Sometimes they join together when you have a group of them, and that way you can hit multiple at one time. We are thankfully though nearing the end here. After a group of blue foot soldiers, we have another group of roadkill Rodneys, and just a couple of small other groups before we make it to the first of the 3 bosses that make up this final level. Right before the first of the 3 bosses that you'll face back to back to back, you have a large group of foot soldiers, like the last-ditch effort of the game, just throwing you a ton of the first normal enemy you dealt with, and then it's boss gauntlet time. The door flies off, and we have a very similar fight to the general Trag battle. For the most part, I'm going to use a very similar strategy that I used in that previous fight, doing the special attack going just slightly up or slightly down, trying to dodge out of the range of his attack as best as possible. While you do have to worry about the gun, the worst part about the gun really is just that swing of the gun that he does over and over again when you're close, since it's so fast and can end up knocking you backwards. Like I said, that strategy of just going slightly up or down around him at least allows you sometimes to hit him and dodge one of the swipes. If you get far away though, he will fire missiles out at you, which can do a pretty good amount of damage. Though like I said, thankfully, if you're up close like you normally will in the fight, most of the time he's just going to end up dealing those hits with his gun. Unfortunately, while I'm able to make it through most of the game without losing a life, this is the first time I end up losing one here. My goal with beat-em-up games, since they are usually very challenging as far as staying healthy, I usually just go for not using any sort of continue in them games, as long as you don't end up losing progress when you lose a life. Right after that, though, we have the boss fight against Krang. Krang is pretty merciless. He has the kick as well as the lasers, and he does them over and over again. The kick hits a good distance away, it's fast, it will keep knocking you away. I honestly don't have a great strategy for dodging most of his attack. It's more like kind of just stay in there and you're going to get hit, but keep doing the special attack and hopefully you'll do enough damage to slowly drain his health. I usually lose a life. Sometimes I end up losing 2 if I'm really unlucky. Depends really how the previous battle went against that Dimension X rock soldier enemy. After losing that life, though, I get right back onto the right side here, keeping him close to me, and just keep doing the attacks over and over again. If I'm on the opposite side, he could knock me away, so thankfully being right up against the wall allows me to get hit and lose health, but get right back into the flow of the fight. Then right after the Krang fight, you have Shredder. You don't get your health back, you just gotta go right into this fight, and it's almost as challenging. It's a little bit easier than Krang. Thankfully, Shredder's attack with his sword is a little bit slower than Krang's attack, so you're able to do the jump kicking attack effectively against him. The thing is though, Shredder has a clone of himself. When you knock the helmet off, this is how you know it's the clone. You'll knock it off right away after like just a couple of hits. However, the other version of him is the one you'll want to focus on. Once that dies, then the battle is actually over. The clone, if you kill it, he'll just spawn another one, so a lot of times it's best to just attack the main one. A good strategy I found is sometimes on the left or right walls, if you keep doing a jump attack with the jump kick, you can kind of get him in a nice little loop, and he'll just keep swinging the sword and missing. If you're lucky, the Shredder clone will stay away from you, or when he comes in close, his attacks will be in a nice timed way where he'll also miss with his swings. It won't last forever. Eventually, though, sometimes they will back away, or Shredder will end up landing a hit on you and knocking you away. When this happens, just do your best to kind of get him back into that loop against that left wall and keep doing the attacks with the jumps. This is a slow fight for sure, and it'll take a while to get his health all the way drained. However, it's more effective than just kind of getting in there with the special attacks, as you will be able to conserve your health and hopefully stay off long enough in order to actually beat Shredder. When the real Shredder is finally getting low on health, he also will end up losing his helmet. Then you just have to deliver the last few attacks, and you can sit back and enjoy the ending, the TMNT 2, the arcade game, on the NES. So there you guys have it, the TMNT2, the arcade game for the NES. When you beat the game, you get to see like the staff, you get the turtle blimp in the background flying overhead, and all the turtles kind of being showcased on the screen on one of the buildings here. TMNT2 may not be the best of the beat-em-up games on the NES or the best Turtles game on the NES, but it was a huge step up for many from the first NES TMNT game. Don't get me wrong, I love that game for what it was, but still, this is much more of what you would expect from a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. At least you have co-op 2-player in this one. The formula they kind of created here by making the NES version of the arcade game worked well in creating the Manhattan Project, the third game that we would end up seeing on the NES. At the end of the credit scene, we get to see Shredder and him laughing, I guess, at us where the staff credits were rolling, and then we get the game over screen, and we can get back to the main menu and start the things all over again. But with that, guys, it's going to wrap up this edition of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.